Chapter 3 of The Heir of Slaves, an Autobiography, by William Pickens. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by James K. White. Beginning School in Earnest. The desperate move to Galloway, in the neighborhood of Little Rock, was by no means an unlucky one. For 1 whole year, of course, we children were kept out of school to clear up the new debt. The debt was paid. Meanwhile, my mother heard that in the city of Little Rock and in the town Argenta across the river from Little Rock, there were 9 months' term of school. Think of it, 9 months of schooling for the children. We moved to Argenta in the winter of 1890-91. This move cityward was not prompted, as is usually charged in such cases, by any desire to get away from work, but by the high motives of education and the future. The prospect struck me with so much force that I set to work and learned to write before I could be sent to school. I could not enter at once. Work had to be done, and means gotten, so that we could start in the fall of 1891. All members of the family worked ceaselessly, about the homes in the city and on the farms near the city. While running errands and making fires at a certain hotel, I saw and recognized the face of a quack doctor, a man with long hair who had once come through the bottomlands from which we had escaped, and had frightened my mother out of all her ready cash for his cure-all medicines, by telling her that I had consumption. Mentioning the incident to him, "Are you the man?" asked I, with boyish frankness. And he, with quack-doctor frankness, replied, "That depends, my boy, upon whether the medicine helped or hurt you, and upon whether you would like to buy some more." The Argenta schools opened in September. We could not attend regularly in the weeks that preceded Christmas, for we were at work picking cotton in the neighboring fields. It took the energies of the whole family to get a start. My attendance before Christmas was for only a few scattering days. After Christmas, however, I started in school not to miss another day during that school year, not to miss another day for the next 7 years' school years, and indeed not to miss another unnecessary day until I had finished at Yale in 1904. This was my real start in school, and I was now nearly 11 years old. As a peaceful country boy, I was at first imposed upon, but one fine day I laid aside my unwarlike habits and became sufficiently belligerent to win the respect of a certain class of my fellows. I had to fight my way on the playground as well as in the classroom, and at the same time I had to render my accounts and make my peace with the stern government of a teacher who was a fine instructor and a severe disciplinarian, just the proper governor for such a rebellious little state as a city public school. I remember how at the end of that school year he called me out with his brows lowering as if a storm was going to break, and sternly commanded me to take my seat on the bench in front of his desk, the well-known judgment seat where many a little sinner had been called to assure, even if a reluctant, repentance. I began mentally to review my day's record in order to anticipate the accusation, when he, with the same sternness of voice, began to pronounce, "This boy," then hesitating and transfixing me with his terrible eye, "entered school 3 months late, started behind everybody else, and now he's the leader of his class." This teacher's name was J.S. Pleasant, and although he was very strict, the name is not at all inapplicable to his general character. He was my teacher for the following 4 years. Very often, when the teacher had passed a question or a problem around to all the rest of the class, and they had failed to answer or to solve it, he would say, "Well, always ready, we'll take it." which was a nickname he sometimes applied to me. In a personal history, I might be expected to tell about my school career and record. In mathematics, I never received less than 100% as a daily average, and only once did I make less than 100% on an examination in that subject. I state this fact because so many men and women of the white race have asked me particularly how I fared in the subject of mathematics. I committed my lessons to memory. The lessons in physiology and history I learned verbatim every day, so that I could repeat them just as they were written, with as much ease as I can say the Lord's Prayer. When I reached the high school, we had a large book known as Barnes' General History. The lessons were from 5 to 10 pages, and I had acquired the ability to commit them by reading them 3 times over. This I did every day. The history teacher at the end of the year, who, after having me stand and recite the last lesson verbatim, said, "I never believed that he would go through this whole book in that way." For the last few minutes of each recitation during the year, she had asked me to rise and go through the whole lesson, as in declamation. She would then question me, evidently to see if I knew the parts as well as the whole. Any question in the lesson would be answered. I had not learned by sound merely. I was deeply in love with school and study. Very often I reached the schoolhouse before the janitor arrived. From the nickels and dimes which I received for errands and small jobs, I would save sufficient money to buy my books. When I was attending the grammar school, my mother endeavored one day to keep me at home to draw water for the washing. She never tried it again. I cried and pleaded as if my heart would burst. The prospect of missing my classes for a day seemed to me absolutely unbearable. It seemed that it would tear down all that I had builded. My mother seized a switch to chastise me, but when she listened to my words and looked into my face, she saw that it was not rebellion, and with a rather satisfied laugh, she said that I might go, if I was that crazy about school. I can see now that she was rather proud of the event, for never again did she make any arrangement that would keep me out of school for a day. The whole family came to regard my attendance at school as a foregone conclusion. The children called me old man because I would not play until after I had learned my lessons. These were almost invariably learned before sundown. At the end of that very year, I received from the teacher a prize for being never absent, never tardy. It was a book entitled Our Manners and Social Customs, and it was the first book outside of a school text that I had ever read. The opportunity which a mother's pride created for my schooling during her life could not continue after her death. She died of overwork and consequent broken health. She had been determined to keep her children in school and had worked from early morning till late at night to that end. We seldom waked early enough to catch a glimpse of her, and before her return at night, sleep had weighed down the eyelids of the younger children. I had just entered upon my 4th year in the city school when my mother died in October. Imagine, if you can, the sorrow and confusion amounting almost to dismay that filled the heart and mind of a boy of 13, who was ambitious and who knew that his mother was the mainstay of his education and his future. A boy who loved school as dearly as any other boy ever loved a gun or a motorcycle. I knew what my mother had meant to the family, and that without her it would be impossible for my father to keep all the children in school. It was her love and ambition, I knew, that had given me the high privilege of study, and without her I could not be certain of my daily bread for the school year on which we had just entered. But the ways of Providence are inscrutable, and this confusion and predicament thrust upon me a blessing. I secured a place to earn my board by rising at 4 o'clock in the morning, and also working after school hours until 7 o'clock in the evening, and I got my lessons just as well or better than ever before. Out of misfortune and a hard situation, I had to pluck independence. In this temporary confusion, one thought was of more permanent help to me than all other things. Mother had taught us to believe in God, and I reasoned that God would not cause such a good mother to begin such a good work and then remove that mother without intending that in some other way that work was to go on. The thought led me on and on to a greater and greater faith in my opportunities. End of Chapter 3. Read by James K. White, Chula Vista.